Alright, so I realized that I must have had a mesh smooth modifier turned on when I exported this character to Mudbox and then brought it back into 3D Studio, which, if you've been following along, wasn't really a necessary step. It was just for showing how to do some texturing on the brim here. But bringing it back in, I can see I got the higher resolution version, which I was thinking of keeping for the game just so I can have a very expressive character in the game. So I don't need to add a mesh smooth to that. The hair, I added a mesh smooth using quad output because I want the hair to be a bit pointier. If you use NURMS, it's a little rounder on the tips. Classic, it's kind of squarish on the tips, which actually looks alright too. I'm going to go with quad here. And for the body again, I got this mesh smooth turned on. There isn't much difference with it on or off, but this would be for your rendered cinema. So I'm going to leave that off for the game version of the character, and same with this. So what we'll do is go to left view, and we'll just start creating the bones for the character. The reason why we want to create the bones in this view is because most of the rotations for the bones we're going to make will primarily be on the axis that turns this way. So that's why we want this view for creating the bones. When you get to the fingers, it's a little different. You'd want to do it in front view because they'll curl this way. Go to Bone Tools and click on Create Bones, and in here you can see your default settings. I think we're going to go with 2 centimeters. Let's create one and see how that looks. About right. Before we do any of this though, what I would suggest doing is click on Geometry, select all your geometry, go to Utilities panel. So there could have been some sort of scaling factor or something. We want everything to have default matrices set up, so as though everything's kind of zeroed out. So we'll click Reset X-Form, Reset Selected, and here's what you'll notice if you click on any of these. They all have this X-Form modifier added. We could continue to add on top of this, but it's preferable to collapse those. Collapse and multiple objects, and then collapse selected, and then close. That'll clean up anything that could cause serious issues with the animation later on. So I'm going to go to Create Bones. Oh, again, let's make the character see-through. Hit Alt-X, and I'm going to go to Bones Only mode so that I'm never actually grabbing the character's geometry. And I'm going to go Create Bones, and starting in the middle for the spine rather than at the back, because you want the geometry to move around where it rotates. So I'm going to start one here. Chest one's going to be your biggest bone because the chest's all kind of one solid piece. Neck and the skull bone. And right click to end, and what you can do is hit bone edit and just kind of position them a little bit better. Let's double click this, use a start color just to make it easier to identify which bones are which. The ones in the middle, I think I'll go with a purple gradient for the middle ones. Let's name these bones. If you click on the modifier over here, you can see the name of the bone. Spine 1, Spine 2, Spine 3, neck. And if you're going to have a whole bunch of characters in your scene, you may want to use prefixes. And depending on how your game engine runs, and if it's going to be adding extra control to the animation, like for the head for example, you may want to use specific prefix identifiers. Nub, it's called. I put the nub prefix first because in one of my converters I can actually identify the nub and just remove it from the overall bone animation because it's not really necessary except for driving the IK stuff. In perspective view, just taking a look at where the neck is, you can see that this actually should start further down. So just with bone edit mode, moving strictly along the Z-axis, move it down into the body a little more and move tip down a little bit, back to left view. You can turn off bone edit. We can actually keep bone edit on, doesn't matter either way. Double click on this so you get all these and go down to reset stretch, which just kind of clears up any scaling artifacts that could occur. If you've moved this tip around at all or done anything with it, just to make sure that the nub is proper, in this case it wouldn't matter because we're probably not going to use it for anything. What you can do is just remove bone and then grab this and hit create end, and it'll make sure that it's set up correctly. We'll probably make sure to do that for the wrists and for the toes and maybe the tip of the tail. Definitely if we plan to use bones in the eyes, we'd want those nubs to be pointed in the right direction. So the next thing we'll do is we'll create a bone for the hip. And it doesn't have to be that big. I'm going to use the align tool. I'll grab this, turn bone edit mode off because we want to move this whole thing. And we're going to align it to this one, spine 1. So line to that one. Just positions, pivot to pivot, apply. And if we want this to be the root bone, we're going to want to parent this one to this one later on. So we'll go with making the leg bones next. Let's create a bone and kind of go with the center of where the knee would be. I'm going to the heel. And we want the tip of the toe to be able to curl a little bit for walking animation. And I'm going to go to edit bones, grab this one. And we're just going to try to get it so that it's kind of about halfway into here. So you don't want it right at the base of the leg, but kind of partway up into the torso. Now if we go front view, turn off bone edit mode, we can grab this whole thing. Well, we only need to grab the top one because we got bone edit mode turned off. And we can move it over, grab this chain here, and don't use the mirror up here, but use the mirror in the bone tools. And move that one into place. All we have to do to make it mirrored over here, as far as position goes, is see what the position is for this, which is right here, as long as you don't have this turned on. And we can copy that, paste it on this one, make sure it's not negative, because this is the positive side, and it should adjust its position so that it's perfect. We want everything to be perfectly symmetrical with this character. If you have an unsymmetrical character, some of the techniques presented in here won't work very good unless you make a perfectly symmetrical proxy of the character and then set it all up with that, and then later you'd have to use more advanced tools with the skinning stuff to fix that. If we go to left view, you want to make sure that your bones are always lining up, and later on we're going to create an inverse, it's an animation, an IK solver, inverse kinematics for the leg, which will connect between here and the heel. So we want to have this angle in here to be the shorter angle than this one, so it can bend this way, and if it's perfectly straight, it could mess up the IK solver, so just keep that in mind, and you'll have to make sure that there's a slight bend too when we do the arms. So next thing I would suggest doing is grab these three and the spine, and we're going to parent them to the root bone. So the root bone will be considered the first bone in the hierarchy, and moving that bone around inside the game engine moves the entire character. So all the bones will follow the root bone. So we'll link these to this root bone. Not the root nub. In fact, later on we'll probably end up getting rid of the root nub because I don't think we're going to use it for anything. We'll keep the toe nubs because we're going to use those. We're going to use some IK so that we can do like heel rolls and stuff like that and have the character jump up and down. This nub we probably won't end up using. The wrist nubs, we're going to create wrist nubs and we'll probably use those. To create the arms, we would want to use this view because of the way that the rotation works. However, the head is in the way here, so we could actually use the bottom view and do it that way. However, that's confusing as well. We'll select geometry, we'll go to object select geometry, select the head. If your head is part of your body, then what you might want to do is select all the polygons that make up the head. For example, maybe it's just something like that you want to select, and you can hide that selection. Right now, the character is an editable mesh, which is not what I normally am used to using. We'll go to editable poly. We'll be able to pick a certain selection of polygons and temporarily hide them, hide selected, right here. And then you'd be able to work after that without that being in your way. But since this is a separate object, we can actually just go ahead and pick the whole object, as well as this object, and just say hide selection. If you wanted to, you can use layers, manage layers. Put your bones in one layer by going create new layer containing selected objects. So you'd want to make sure that all your selected objects that you want in there are selected, and then hit create new layer. Otherwise, you can create a new layer, and once you got your layer set up, you can actually create layers inside layers too. So you might have different characters, and then you'd have like the kid character, and then you'd have a layer inside that called bones, another layer called body, another layer for rig controllers, and so on and so forth. And you can just freeze all of them at once. You can hide them all at once, unhide them all at once. It's very convenient. I have a bad habit of forgetting that certain things are hidden or frozen, and I've had several times where I just thought there was something wrong with the program and I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I would suggest, if you're working professionally, to use layers. For simple setups like this, I just get around it by using the selector here for geometry only. Shapes I use for controllers. Bones are obviously bones. IK, like you can select your different things with that, and that way you're not accidentally selecting things you don't want to. And then I just use hide or unhide because I don't have very many objects. Like I think right now all I'm really working with, and in here too, like you can pick what's visible for objects that you can select. So I could display the bones here as well, and I could just display bones, and I could just display shapes, which would be my controllers. And being able to just select your bones in here too comes in handy. So right now we want to go to top view. I mean, if you wanted to and the head's in the way and you don't feel like hiding anything, you could actually even just create the bones for the arm out here, drag them in and correct their position along this axis using the front viewport. But you want to make sure you create them in this viewport. So like top or bottom viewport. We'll go create bones, we'll create a clavicle and elbow and a wrist, and then end it to create the nub. And we're going to keep this nub. Go to edit mode, and we don't have that bend in the arm, so we're going to want to make sure that we add that when we're adjusting the bone positions. So go select and move, go to bone mode, and we can move this into place. See if F3 gives us a better idea where things are. It's a wireframe mode. You don't have to be in bone edit mode if you're grabbing the base bone for this. We'll drag this up. And so the shoulder should be around here. Now we'll use bone edit mode, and we only want to move locally along the X. There's not going to be any IK here, but there'll be IK for this. So we'll pull this back, and this is going to bend here. Maybe pull this a bit forward. Right where this little corner is here should be right on this line of the wrist, somewhere in the middle of it. This one should be where the bicep bends. I think it's here. Let's go to the front view and see if that seems right. You may notice when I'm in the front view, make sure to set the reference coordinate system to local. Let's rotate this, turn off edit bone, and we want to rotate it so that all of them move down a bit. That should be good. Turn edit mode back on, make any further adjustments. Want to move this back a little bit. Oh yeah, by the way, each time we parent stuff, it's a good idea to select that parent and see if everything follows when you move it. Otherwise, you may have had it on unlink by accident or something like that. Let's do some renaming here before we forget. The reason I'm using green on this side and blue on this side is because it's easier to distinguish right from left, and that's kind of the color conventions for right and left that you'll use with skinning too, so it makes it a little easier to know what you're doing. So if you double click, you can set those colors here. Normally you'd want a prefix like bone. We can go ahead and add those prefixes later though, bone underscore, and then for the nubs it'd be nub underscore. And I think I'm just going to stick to generic names because this is a fairly simple character. Again, there's not going to be other characters mixed with this, and this is just an example. This is the right side actually for the character. It looks like the left because we're looking at it from the other direction. So I'm going to say right thigh, I'm going to say right calf, right foot, L for left view, right toe, I'm going to say nub, right toe. So we should have done that before we mirrored over to this side, and then it would be easier to use the rename tool. So in this case, because how I did this, I'm just going to go like that, and actually I'm just going to type them in, probably the fastest. So just left thigh, left calf, left foot, shift R. Oh yeah, I keep forgetting I got this. Right toe, go nub, right toe. Go back to front view. Okay, so we're going to name these first this time, and then that way we can use the rename tool, which will make it a little easier. So this will be the left clavicle, because it's on the right side. So I'll just say clav, left bicep, left wrist, nub, left wrist. I'm going to make this into 3 segments so that I can turn the wrist and have a gradual effect. Actually, this is a short enough section of wrist, so we could probably get away with doing 2 and just balance out the rotation distribution based on the 2 segments of bone. So when this bone rotates, when the wrist rotates, there's going to be a second one over top of it that's going to rotate at a percentage of the rotation speed for this one. And we'll use wire parameters to set that up. And for a game character, for the in-game activity, that might not be necessary, but for your cinematic stuff, it'll come in handy for better looking wrist rotations. So what we could do is use the refine and just make this into 2 bones, somewhere in the middle. If you want to know exactly where the middle would be, create a box, set it to 2 width segments, and then that way you can see right in the middle where it is. So then we can go back to selecting the bone here, select object, select bone, click refine, we'll refine it about right here, and then we can make this into 2 parts. So unclick refine, and we'll name this one. So this is left wrist. I'm going to call it left wrist 1, and this will be left wrist 2. And if you had a slightly longer forearm with more geometry, you'd probably want to use 3 segments. So like each one would move at a gradually increasing speed of influence. We'll have a controller for rotating the wrist. This one will rotate the slowest, this one will rotate the fastest. We'll have the hand rotated exactly at the same speed. I'm going to say wrist 2, just to say what the last one was before that. Oh yeah, we can go back to geometry select, grab that box 001, delete that, and go back to bone select, double click, grab all of it, and we'll use a mirror tool. And we can set some offset here if we wanted. Hit OK, go to select and move, click on this, want to go view, and copy this, paste it here, and it should be a negative number, and now they're actually symmetrical. So making sure all these bones are selected on the character's right arm, we'll go to Tools and use Rename Objects. And there's 10 letters that say mirrored on the end of each one of these. We want to get rid of those. So remove the last 10. And we'll remove the first 2, and from R underscore or L underscore, we're going to change that to R underscore. Oh, and turn off base name. Okay, so now they're all R underscore. We'll just have to change the nub here to nub R underscore. Now we got to add the tail, and so we'll want left view, and we're going to create bones. So we'll have a bone start about here, and we'll want a fair amount of control over it. So I'm going to say let's put 3 segments in here. Turn off create bones, double click, and just quickly set some colors here, like a start color, end color, and then quickly go ahead and name them. Tail 2, and I'm probably going to edit these right away so that they're closer to the same length. So bone edit mode, grab this one, we'll leave it back to about here maybe, and this one, yeah, maybe about here. That looks about right. We could add another bone for the chest to add breathing. We could even add one to make the front of the belly move a little bit if we're not using the flex modifier for that. That would just be for like the in-game motion. The flex would be more for the cinema display scenes, so you get a little more detail in the motion of the clothing and stuff. If you're using morph target exports, like baking them out, you can go all out on all kinds of detail with soft body dynamics and such. It'll export out every 5th or 10th frame or whatever it is you have it set up to. It'll export out that entire target mesh and will just interpolate between each mesh. I notice too when you're animating a character, if you have the character doing kicks or lifting their leg up quite a bit or pushing it back quite a bit, this bone alone is not going to work for proper distortion back here. You're going to get some weird artifacts. The same may even be true a bit on the front. So I'm going to create a bone back here so that I get a more accurate version of the movement of that part of the leg. So create one, go straight back, and then left click. We'll line this up to the leg here, the right thigh, but we only need to align it by X position. And we can do that with this as well. We should actually grab both of these, just X position. And so I'm going to remove this last bone and then recreate the end nub, create end. And then that way its rotation is set up correctly. Let's say right cheek. We'll do the same for the other side. So double click this. I'm just clicking mirror here. And the position of this one, we'll capture it here. And we're going to need the positive version over here. So again, remove this one and recreate the end nub. We might not actually end up using these end nubs, but we're going to keep them here for now. And we'll just go ahead and rename these so that it's easier to identify which is which. And the colors for these, so we can identify right from left. We may want to control this movement and have the chest move to make the character breathe, so we'll do that next. This part would be basically just to give a little bit more bouncy dynamics to the character, give you a little more control of the animation. You might actually even want to add something in here and quite a few in the hair if you want in-game control of all that stuff so that it moves around the way you want it to. So you got to think of where you want it to rotate from, and I'm going to say about right here. So we'll say it's already partly down, and it can go as potential to go up and down, and we'll just name this one belly. They really ought to be all named like bone something so that you know it's not a piece of geometry or something, especially if you're working with other people. So just to keep that in mind. I'm going to go with the same types of colors. Okay, and then one for the chest, because I like to be able to make the character breathe, gives them more life. Right here, this goes up and down, so let's use the edit mode, pull this out a bit more. So there's a more gradual up-down here. It has a little more control over more of these vertices. And I want it to rotate from back here, and maybe down here a bit. Okay, so we'll call this chest. nub chest. We're also going to rig up the head too here after we finish the hands. Let's go top view. Now the hand mostly rotates from this view, so we'll create the hand bone here, and we'll do the fingers too, and then kind of drag them down into place. So I'm going to start the bone off. If we start it here, it's going to attach. We don't want to do that right away, so start the bone off for the hand about here, and I believe we want it lined up. I want all this stuff lined up, so edit bone. Let's go with this. I'm going to just hit delete and click that and go create end. Then that way it's lined up with the one behind it. So we'll just call this nub L wrist. This one we'll use the align tool and we'll align it to this nub. XYZ position, orientation. Okay, so we'll have all those lined up. Grab this one, just hit remove bone. We're not going to need the hand nub anyway, so I'm probably just going to ignore that. Our front view. Okay, we're going to create the end so we can move it around. So it should be something like that. Actually, you know what? Let's delete this. Before we do any of that, let's grab all this by double clicking and hit reset stretch. So I have a feeling we should do that for everything here, or we could end up with some strange animations. Unlikely, but possibly. That just has to do with scaling. Reset stretch, reset stretch. Not sure if I did this one and this one yet. Now back to using the align tool. I want to align that with this one. And I'm just going to go x-axis, and we'll grab this, moving it the local y-x, and move it up. Okay, and we'll rotate it to about here. And we'll just grab this final bone here and make it really, really small so it's not obstructing our view. So I'll go 1 and 1. Just grab this, pull it back a bit. Maybe we'll make the hand a bit wider, reduce the taper, and widen it a bit. That way it's easier to distinguish it between the nub and the actual hand bone. So left view again, because that's, or front view I mean, because that's the direction the fingers will curl. That's where you want to create your bones. Create bone, and I'm just going to create it up here. These are really short bones, and actually, you know, I'm going to turn off create bone here. I'm going to delete this, and over in this panel over here, I'm going to change these to 1 centimeter, and we'll create end. Go back to this one, boost the width again, and then we're going to create bones, changing the defaults to 1 centimeter on this side. Go to front view, hit Z to get back to where we were looking, and we'll create some fingers. We want these to be approximately same length, and I'm just going to move this one into position, and then use rotate. And so when I go to move these, you want to make sure you change view for reference coordinate system to local. So you're moving along this local direction rather than the view direction, because it's a lot more difficult. And then they're not coplanar. So you want to keep them coplanar as much as you can. So bone edit mode, and it went to local already because that was the last thing I was using. And we just want to move in the X direction. So don't use this, just use this. So the end of the finger I think is the smallest when I looked at that reference image, so I'm going to kind of make it a little bit smaller. Then we could actually apply the color here and then rename these index 1, index 2, index 3. What I'm going to do though before I do any of that, because these are all going to have different names anyway, I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to clone it using edit clone or shift drag and do copy. We'll have to create a new nub for each one of these when we're done. We can grab the base bone for this, and we got edit mode on, we have to turn that off. And since these fingers are a little bit different in length, we may need to go to edit mode and go along the local X again and adjust their position along local X using this and this. Then we'll delete the nubs using remove bone and then use create end on each one of those again. And then name these ones index 1, index 2, index 3. This one would be mid 1, mid 2, mid 3. This one will be ring 1, ring 2, ring 3. This one will be pinky 1, and so on and so forth. So we'll do the same thing with the thumb. So I'm just going to pause this and fill in these fingers. Oh yeah, I should point out that when you go to move the nub after you've changed this stuff around, you'll need to remove the nub and create the end again before trying to move it around, because otherwise it'll move along the wrong local plane. Okay, I actually was getting some artifacts here. So what I actually recommend doing is go to view mode, create your bones all from this view here. So make sure to create them in here. And then after you've created them, turn off create, go to edit. And we don't want to change the plane here. So what we'll do is turn off edit mode, move it into place and rotate it. Then we can use edit and local, only changing position along the X here. We'll make the tip the smallest, I think. Turn off bone edit mode. Double click all of these. Turn off local, change it to view, because otherwise you're going to get some problems showing up. Make a copy, grab the base bone, move it into position, and rotate it to the correct angle. And we're going to have to move these all vertically as well. So for now, I'm just kind of getting them lined up from the top view. Again, you want to view and shift drag it to copy it. Grab the base bone, rotate it, position it. We'll do that for the pinky too. Double click, shift drag, just this one. Move it to where we want it, and get it so that it's at the correct angle. Now we can go into bone edit mode, grab the tip. Actually, we could start here and just move this in, but we want to use local now for this. So move along the X in local. Here, probably want this to come a bit forward. It's a little bit after that ring. They're all kind of around that same spot. Okay, and we can even do the same thing for the thumb. Turn off edit, turn off local, make sure it's in view before you attempt to do so. Shift drag and just grab the base, kind of put it inside the thumb a bit and rotate it. So with bone edit mode on now, get these bones to where they should be, approximately. Okay, so that's all for top view, but it's misaligned in the other views. So let's double click this one, go into perspective mode, hit Z, and move it down into the finger. So with bone edit mode turned off, we'll grab this base bone and just move strictly down on the Z axis. And it should look like it's kind of center to the hand, or to the fingers. So let's grab each base bone with edit mode turned off. We'll move it strictly in the Z axis here until we got it embedded in each finger. It's going to depend on how straight your fingers are as to whether these bones are going to intersect your geometry as well as you'd like them to. So the final bones might come out the bottom of the tips of the finger if they're a little pointed. It should be okay. You just got to think of how, when this rotates, how it's going to influence the surrounding geometry. So this one, it looks like they're all kind of sloping up a tiny bit, so maybe I will just kind of grab each one and aim it toward the fingertip a little more and make sure that the base is far enough down into the geometry. So we kind of get equal initial influence over the surrounding geometry. Like this one should go down and then rotate up. Oh, and for the rotations, you probably should use local. Then you can go back to view. Let's move this thumb down. So it's kind of planted in the middle of the thumb. Oops, we don't want to move that one. So let's go to local rotation and we'll rotate it about there. So it's kind of in the middle of the geometry. And grab each bone for each base of each finger. Use the select and link and drag out and select the hand. So whatever the hand does, it's going to influence these base fingers. And if we don't plan on modifying the hand rotation position or anything, we could actually get rid of that nub. We'll wait till we get to the end of our rigging before we do those kinds of cleanups. So now you can just go ahead and name your thumb objects, your finger objects, and then we'll go into using mirror and do the same thing for the other side. So go select object, and for example, call this index 1, and then this one index 2. We could also use the rename tool and just use that base name and give them all index, and then have it set the numbers for them automatically. For example, I can set a base name of mid. In fact, we could put a prefix here, but we can just put the prefix here. So left mid, and set numbered, step of 1, base number I'm going to say is 1, and rename. So this is mid 01, mid 02, mid 03. Another thing you can do is you can simply select the portion you want to copy, select the next one, just press 2, next one, Control V, press 3, and the last one, Control V, and I'm going to use the prefix of nub left. In fact, I changed all of these so that they all start with the prefix of nub. Depends on your preference or what you're doing in your game engine. We'll do the same thing for thumb. After you've named your thumb bones, it's a good idea to check to see if your hand causes the fingers to follow properly. Control Z to undo, and change this to left hand. Note that we haven't actually linked this to the arm yet. What we're going to do first is double click on this hand, get everything, and use mirror. Let's check the hand's position and copy it from here. We'll paste the same position with a negative into here. And now the right hand should be the correct location. I'm double clicking all of these, except in my case, I'm going to unselect the nubs, because I'll have to do those a little differently. And what it'll do is go rename objects and select base name. And we're going to remove the first digit, or you could even say 2 digits, and change the prefix to R underscore if you go with 2 digits. Hit rename. And we also have this mirrored on the end again. So let's get rid of that with rename and remove the last 10 digits. Since we had the nub selected, it did it for those two. So for these, I have nub underscore L for each one, I think. Yes, and those are all the same, so we can use the rename objects. And we're going to want nub underscore R, and remove the first 5 before we do that. And just checking the naming, make sure it worked. Okay, and we can go ahead and add a color gradient if you want to. And do the same thing to the right side. Now what I'm going to do is grab the hand, and I'm going to parent it to the wrist nub. We're actually going to keep the wrist nub in the final product. Please select and link. You should see that wrist nub flash when it links to it. I'm going to grab this one and link it to here. If you wanted to, you could actually parent it to this wrist if you're not using IK, and you might even be able to get rid of this nub on the end. With this rig, I'm going to use IK, so I'm going to keep it. And you'll notice now, if you do anything with the wrist, it's going to affect the hand as well. One thing we haven't done yet with any of our bones is freeze transforms. Once we've finished getting all the bones to where we would like them, we'll use freeze transforms so that it can remember the exact positions and orientations, the exact matrices of all these bones in their default position. And if you don't have freeze transforms for everything and you mess up your animation and you want to go back to your normal T-pose or start a new animation, it can cause you a lot of disastrous problems. So you would definitely want to make sure you have your freeze transforms set. And anytime you want to deal with those, you hold down Alt and then hit right click and you'll see these options. And transform to 0 is to set them back to their initial pose. Let's parent some of this stuff. So this one, and this one, we can link those to the chest bone. The belly, I would say we could link to this bone, or even this bone, probably doesn't matter. Now you might think that this bone should be linked to the thigh, but we actually don't want to do that. We want these to be able to animate independently from what the thigh is doing. So we're going to link these actually to the root. The tail I'll want influenced by the bottom spine. So anytime the character does any bending or anything, or the legs are moving, just to maintain extra control, we want to make sure these two are kept separate, and you'll see what I mean if you do any kind of exaggerated animations. Things get really out of hand in certain areas and distort in really weird ways, just because of the way the geometry is set up. Let's select geometry, go unhide by name. And for now, we'll just go with the head. And we're going to go with a jawbone, 2 jawbones, a lower jaw and upper jaw, so we can create really open mouth expressions. And later on, we can combine that with morph targeting for cinema-based expressions. You could even add an extra bone or 2 to create in-game mouth expressions. And it's even possible to animate texture across the surface if you just had this all flat, depending on if you're using a retro style or something. First thing we'll do is create a lower jawbone. We'll just start by pulling out this bone here and thinking about where it's going to rotate from. Before we do that though, let's boost this back up to 2. And then we'll do a lower jawbone down here. In this case, I'm going to use eye bones, and we can control the eye targeting a little more easily in the game with the use of eye bones. I'm going to use the quick align, grab this one here, go to bone edit mode, and we'll just pull this one up so that's at the upper part of the lip. Pull this one up a bit, and we'll name these upper jaw, lower jaw. And I'm going to double click this, hit reset stretch. Same thing here. I'll grab both of these and link them to the head. We could set some colors for that too if we wanted. 2 bones for the eyes. Let's go geometry, unhide by name, left and right eye. In this case, I did not export and import the clear part that goes over top of the eye, but we could merge that in here, or we could do that later. Now, one thing that's kind of tricky is I cut off the backs of the eyes, so we want to make sure when we go into pivot, click pivot, the pivot for the eye is actually centered to the eye geometry. Technically not centered to the eye geometry, but centered to the sphere that was originally there. And it should be because I had it set up that way initially. So just to make sure, we'll take a look at it. if I were to move pivot, you can see that it's located in this longest section here. And if we go to front, it should be centered. Just this one vertex is pushed to the side. Oh yeah, that was just to make it look a bit better from the side view. Anyway, that's fine. It is actually in the center. I mean, you can go top view and you can see it's definitely in the center. So we can turn off effect pivot only. We don't have to worry about getting that 100% centered to that sphere because it's already centered. So if the eye rotates, it's going to rotate correctly. And that's if we were to take the eye and just use a look at restraint. What we're going to do though is we're going to add a bone, and we can actually point the eyes around with the bone and even have the bones optionally restrained to look at an object or a controller over here. So depending on how you want to do it. We'll deselect eye, go into bone, select only, object select, okay. I'm going to go left view. The eyes will mostly look left to right. They won't look up and down so much. So I'm going to create the bones from this view. Use snap and create it so it's looking exactly straight. And right click to end. You can keep angle snap on. Grab this base and quick align to the eye. Oh yeah, I have to have all available here. And I'll use P to see, okay, yeah, it is for sure aligned to the eye and is centered where the eye should pivot. That way when this thing looks around, the eye won't be offset as it rotates. And we can grab this, use bone edit mode, move this back along the x-axis until it's about right here. Actually, we could pull this out a little bit so we can grab that end if we want to test it. I'm gonna go top view, turn off edit mode, double click. Whoops, make sure you go to bones only, double click. And we could just shift drag it over. I'm just gonna go mirror. And I'm going to quick align it to the eye. Oh yeah, I have to have all again. So now that we're sure these are aligned with the eye geometries and their pivots, we can go ahead and name these and color them. Instead of parenting them to the head, here's what we're going to do. Grab this one and this one, and we're going to parent them to the upper jaw. So just make sure that instead of linking to here, you link to the upper jaw. And that way, when the upper jaw, when the mouth opens this way, the eyes and everything else will follow. So as far as vertex weights go, we're not actually going to want this head bone to influence much of this geometry at all. What we'll actually do is we'll take the envelope initially for this upper jaw bone and extend it out into the head and make most of the upper jaw motions be the main influencer for all the geometry in the head, and then the lower jaw just for down here. And we don't want to parent the upper jaw to the lower jaw because then when it moves up, it's going to move up too, which we don't want. Just going to quickly rename these and color them. And I'm calling this right eye bone and right eye bone nub, or just right eye nub, or right nub eye. Actually, I was going nub right eye because of my naming convention. Left eye bone, nub left eye. What we should do now is go through the model and make sure that everything's parented. And as you can see, everything's parented, and you just want to also make sure it's parented to the correct parts. So if I move this, it should not move this part. This should influence the belly and the tail. Okay, everything seems to be fine. To start off with, we'll just get the easy stuff out of the way. We'll make it so that the eyes will actually follow the eye bones. I'm going to select all here, and I'm going to select right eye. In the modifier stack, I'm going to go with skin. Hit S to get to it. We can add bones to it, so click add, and we want the right eye bone because this is the right side eye. We'll go to the stuff that starts with R, or you can use R underscore eye bone, and just select it. You can check out the edit envelopes if we wanted. Everything's red, so it's 100% influenced already, so we don't have to make any modifications. Alt X. So if I grab the eye bone, whoops, I had to hit the X key and I lost this. Hit X again to toggle it, and then I can move the eye around. Control Z, and just do the same thing to the other side. Grab it, add a skin modifier, and add the left eye bone. This is the left side. So we can type that in here. And the envelopes are smaller than the eye, but it's going to give it 100% influence by default with the way it's set up. So if we want now, we can go ahead and just grab the eye and test it. So now we have the eyes that they can follow, the eye bones. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is double click our root bone, and it should select all the child bones. I'm going to hold down Alt, right click, and say freeze transform. Before I do that, I'm going to save it though, because sometimes when I do this, I have strange things happen. Freeze transform, yes. Now we should be able to pose the character bones in a variety of ways, and if we hold down Alt and right click, we can go transform to 0 for individual pieces, or we can double click, transform to 0. Rotation to 0 won't take into account position offsets and stuff. Safest bet is to go transform to 0. That'll undo all your transformations and get back to the starting matrix for each bone. So far so good. If you wanted, you could also add in bones for the upper and lower eyelids, or even use a floating shape as a bone to modify the skin position and control the eyelids or different parts of the face for different expressions and stuff. We'll get into that a little bit later. We'll probably depend mostly on morph targets for face animation for the cinematics, so we can get very specific facial expressions. And then we can blend different parts of those expressions together using the percentage sliders to get combinations of animated expressions. Morph targeting can actually be fairly flexible, and you can get a little bit more flexibility by adding some extra bones to the surface of the face, so you can do some really crazy distortions for really exaggerated cartoon-like expressions. Actually, if we added to the texturing some eyebrows, that would probably be a good idea. And then we could create some shapes on the tops of the eyes to kind of make the eyebrows lift up or go down or look angry or whatever. And it's not going to interfere with your morph targets. They actually blend together rather nicely. Like at this point, you could actually begin adding your skin modifier, and you could just begin painting your vertex weights. That's the amount of influence that each bone has over each vertex, so that it bends and distorts nicely. You could go ahead and start doing that. I find the IK solvers work great for legs and jumping and stuff like that, so I'd say for sure we're going to use IK solvers for the legs and heel and toe and such. And yeah, I think we're going to set it up for the arms too, even though sometimes I find that the arm animation is a little bit of a pain. I almost forgot though, before we continue, we haven't finished the bones for the head yet. I want to add ones for the ears and for certain parts of the hair that we'd like to be able to control so that it works in the game. We'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to do this in the left viewport, and I'm going to add 3 sections to the ear so that it can flop around. Normally I just use 1 bone for the ear, but since I want the ears to be really floppy and I want to be able to do very specific animations with them, and I want it to work in the game as well, that's why I'm going to do it this way. Let's go left here, go to Bones Edit Only. Just to be safe, I'm going to go into Geometry here for now and freeze these. If we were using Manage Layers, we could just click on the freeze thing for the geometry right in there. So we'll freeze those selections. That way we don't accidentally move them around. Much safer. So grab that, go front view, right here, and then rotate this down, not locally, but in the view here. We'd want it local if we were doing anything that's not the base for positioning and such. We can actually move these, bone edit. Should be fine. So let's bring this right to the tip. I'm going to bring these all up because I mostly want this flexing to happen on the end rather than at the base. And in perspective mode, we can see a little bit more about what kind of modifications should be made here. Just thinking about where the envelopes are going to go. And I'm just going to remove this, delete, and create end. I'm going to use mirror by double clicking that. And copy this position, except without the negative. Oops, let's delete that. Double click, turn off bone edit mode, click mirror. Okay, now we can do it and paste it into here, take the negative off and go to click on Y just to see the change. I would say the base probably should move more inward, and for that we're going to need bone edit mode because we don't want to move the rest of it. So let's grab both these at the same time, move them in, okay, and unselect. And before I name and color all this stuff, I think I'm just going to unhide the hair, geometry, unhide by name, hair. Let's go to display and click on backface cull, and I should probably do that for the other objects too. Oh yeah, the other objects are frozen. It's going to go unfreeze all, grab this, backface cull, and I'm going to do that here, maybe this one too. Temporarily, we'll just have to remember that those are on. We can hide those completely. let's say we can hide that too. We just want to make some bones for certain parts of the hair. Maybe add one back here that could influence the tips of all of these. Just one bone that bobbles up and down, and have the tips of them kind of follow. And then we could have one or two or a couple segments on the ends of these to kind of make them sway around. So that's up to you. Okay, so with create bones, I'm going to create a bone back here to just give a tiny little bounce influence to these back hair pieces, which are not really going to move much at all, just very subtly. We'll go into bone only mode, create bones, and we'll start with, and I really just want the ends of the hair to bend. And I think I can get away with just having all of these ends on this side bend. Let's grab this one, just move it this way, and we'll just expand the envelopes so that it covers all the geometry we want it to cover. Double click, mirror, okay, and this might not match up exactly in a symmetrical way, so we'll just move it over to the right, kind of plant it where it kind of looks like it belongs, because the hair is definitely not symmetrical. So as far as vertex weights goes for the hair, we're going to have to do vertex weighting individually on both sides of the head. Everything else is symmetrical, so we can actually use the vertex weight mirroring tool, but just not on the hair. We'll create another couple of bones, maybe one here and one here, starting here, and one more right here. Good, that should be more than enough to get control of everything. So let's bring these forward and rotate them. You can kind of see where it goes in and out of the geometry there. So rotate that. You have to move the view around to kind of get an idea of where it is in 3D space. I would say these vertices over here, we could give a little tiny influence from whatever is going on with this one here. And we'll grab this one, move it forward, move it backward, and rotate it. And it's going to have some influence over this one too. So it's going to have a tiny bit of influence on this one too when we expand the envelopes. These little bits here, I'm just going to kind of leave them. Just a matter of naming and coloring them. Oh yes, and also don't forget to parent these using this link, select and link. Each base needs to be parented, I would say, to the upper jaw, so that whenever the upper jaw goes up, the whole head is basically moving back. So that's something you would need to do. Don't parent it to the head bone, because then you'll get strange things where when the mouth opens using the upper jaw, the hair stands still while the rest of the head kind of moves. After you're done that, and it's all parented, double click the root pelvis again, and use Alt, hold down Alt and right click, and use Freeze Transform. And then you can test out moving these around, and then Alt, right click, and transform to 0 to make sure that everything returns to its original pose. And save it as a new file. Make sure you have a backup copy before you continue. Okay, now we got all the bones colored and named. I'm going to use Alt X here and unfreeze all. Start with the body. So the first thing we need to do is add a skin modifier. Press S. Before I do that, I want to convert this to an editable poly in case I want to make any modifications, and I'll just look around and see if there is any, but I think it's good. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that these are all editable polys first, and then just see if there's any changes we need to make. I'll save this file, and we'll save it as a new one. Save as, and we'll go number 5. That way we have a backup we can work from in case we really mess something up badly. So selecting the body, hit S to get the skin modifier. Then for bones, click add, and we don't want anything related to eyes, and we can actually turn off the geometry here. We just have this display bones here. For the body, we're going to want the right hand, any of this finger related stuff. I'm not sure what this is. I think I might have messed up some of the naming here. Let's go to bones only mode. I'm going to hit F3 and just click on some of these and see if I messed up the naming of something, because it was giving me names that I did not recognize. Okay, so pinky. See if I messed up. No, pinky's okay on this side. Oh, I know why. Because I didn't call it left pinky. So when I used rename, it messed everything up. So I'll just change this to pinky. Pinky 1, and do that for this one and the other one too. With PI in front. That's all I really need to do. The nub should be alright. Hit F3. Alright, let's go back to geometry and add bones. So right hand, you can hold down shift, and oh, what's this one? We've got another strange anomaly. So apparently we forgot to name the nubs for the hand. When we do cleanup, we might end up getting rid of those nubs because I don't think we're going to be using them. Now we can go back into geometry mode. F3, pick the body, got the skin modifier added still. Select the bones we want to add to the body. So we're not doing the head or the hair, those are separate geometry. We're going to do the hand, so everything from below the neck. So you can hold shift and get all the way down to here. The right toes, right wrist, root nub, we don't care about the nub. Pelvis, actually we should actually rename that. Yeah, just continue until you got everything selected. Oh, what's this? Bone 01, bone 05, bone 06. I'll have to check those out. Those are probably hair bones I didn't name yet. See, we got this one named. Nub skull. Oh, probably I deleted the end and then re-added it, and that's why. Alright, let's see if there's anything else weird going on here. Let's grab this one. It's probably another one where I deleted the end and re-added it. Nub, upper jaw, and this one's nub, lower jaw. And I assume that root one was called root nub. We're going to call it nub root, so we can kind of take it out of the equation here. Hand, index. Let's just keep going until everything that pertains to the body has been selected. These are mid fingers, ring fingers, thigh, thumb, wrist. Now we don't need the nub to distort any geometry, so any of the nubs we won't select. Neck is going to be part of the head, so we're not going to use that one. Bicep, calf, let's see, just keep going here. Foot, index, hand. Just trying to keep my eye out for anything that I might accidentally select or not select. And yeah, we will add the root pelvis, not the skull, the spine, and the tail, and everything else pertains to head or hair. So let's select, and already there's going to be some influence on some of the geometry. So if you go into bones and grab one of these, for example, you can see that it's already trying to move the geometry around a bit. We just got to make some changes to the skin mesh weights so that it moves properly. So we're going to edit envelopes. We could start, you can actually select these bones like this. So you're selecting the bone envelope by selecting these gray things. And this is just to kind of flesh out some initial strength, some initial influence. And what you can do if you want, you can actually copy this envelope settings over to this one if you want. So then you got the same thing on both sides. You can even avoid envelopes altogether, like just ignore them, and dive straight into using weight table or the weight tool. I actually really like the weight table once you figure out tricks to using it. There's things that are not all that obvious in here that once you know, it can make your life a lot easier. And you can see the percentage influence based on color. So red is 100% influenced, blue is partially influenced. These inner ones here are kind of telling you anything inside this is going to be like 100%, or well, not necessarily 100%, but very strongly influenced. And it's kind of giving you your fall off rate. So starting from super strong to the weakest out on the edge here. What it does is it calculates these envelopes against each other, and these kind of control what percentage influence they'll have relative to one another. So if I want to strengthen anything with inside this one, I can actually pull this one out more, and you can watch the color change. Right now I don't have the vertex visibility on, but if I hit F4 you can see that they're turning yellow back here, meaning they're influenced partly by this and partly by whatever's here. One thing you want to make sure of is that your envelopes are not going to overlap onto the other side. There is a way to use the exclude selected vertices to prevent vertices on the other side from being influenced. So there's that. I think I grabbed the wrong one, because I want to just select this side and then just kind of copy everything over to the other side. But like I said, this is just kind of initially for fleshing it out, and we'll do some fine tuning after. So if we go to bone select and grab this leg or this calf, for example, you can see it's starting to distort it a little bit more accurately based on the envelope percentage influence, but obviously there's a lot more work to do yet before everything looks right. So I'm just going to kind of adjust these envelopes all the way up the character until I'm kind of comfortable with them, and then I'm going to go into blocking out the weights a little more accurately, and then we'll finish off with the vertex weight paint tool to get the perfect weights, and then we'll mirror them over to the right side. When we do the hair, we'll have to use the vertex weight paint tool and animate the bones to varying positions and just play with the slider and see how the vertex weights are influencing the animation, and just keep painting until it adjusts to the way it should look in that particular animation pose. So if the hair is bent up all the way like this on frame 20, I just keep painting them until it looks the way it should on frame 20, go back to like frame 0 and adjust the paint weights a little bit more for each bone until it looks the way it should.